Welcome to the Musculoskeletal Minute Podcast, where we talk about all things musculoskeletal. Today, we're going to be starting off with pain. Pain is almost a universal experience. It has inspired philosophical essays and discourses to expletive-filled bursts of emotion. Back pain, for example, impacts 80% of people and is one of the leading causes of disability and medical expenses. It transcends nationalities, cultures, and is even in fictional worlds. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we read that the magical tent that they borrow came from Perkins. I borrowed this from Perkins at the office. Doesn't camp much anymore. Poor fellow, he's got lumbago. This is a magical tent that looks like a normal tent that us muggles have on the outside, and on the inside, it looks as much like a mansion. And yet, they still suffer from lumbago, or back pain. So clearly, this is a massive problem. How much of an impact does this have in society? Where did this all start? Pain probably is one of the earliest evolved senses for the safety of basic single-cell organisms, causing them to retract, steer away from harmful substances. And of course, as organisms have only gotten more and more complex, the pain sensation has only gotten more and more complex as well. I'd say we can safely assume that mankind has always suffered from pain. We can easily assume that Thag Simmons experienced pain when he encountered the Thagomizer, which, thanks to the Far Side comic about Thag's untimely demise, meeting the pointy end of the Stegosaurus tail, is actually the name that scientists call the Stegosaurus tail. In my research of real, not fictional environments between Harry Potter and the Far Side comics, in my real research, the earliest record of pain that I was able to find was from an Egyptian papyrus in 1500 BC. However, there's been records of pain treatments dating long back before then. Clay tablets have been found in Mesopotamia, describing the poppy as the plant of joy. These Mesopotamians were finding joy from opium and writing about it 8,000 years ago. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Indian, and Chinese medical texts have also referred to the medicinal uses of the poppy plant. Homer's Odyssey even mentions the use of opium to soothe pain. It's still used today, but under fancier brand names. Other historical treatments still remain today, though they've become slightly more scientific. Instead of using an electric fish or eels, we now use eStim or TENS machines, or even the surgically implanted spinal cord stimulators still rely on electricity to dull the sensation of pain. Aspirin is a derivative of willow bark, which was prescribed by Hippocrates himself. Acupuncture also has ancient ties and is increasing in popularity. One of these days, I will make a podcast devoted to ancient remedies, some that have withstood the test of times and other that have not. But I want to focus more on the historical significance of pain in this podcast. The Egyptian papyrus that was previously mentioned describes acute low back pain, along with its associated exam and part of the treatment. Only part, though, unfortunately. And it's set up perfectly to go with one of the age-old arguments, bed rest or activity. It sounds as though the author is going one way, but we'll never know. Somehow the papyrus ended up buried with a mummy, so we can only assume that the author just had writer's block that lasted a little too long and he never finished writing his case report. I will provide a link to the article, which includes a translation of that text in the show notes. We have many more writings, though, from the Greeks, and we can actually thank the Greeks for the word pain, and the use in our English language comes from the Greek goddess of revenge or punishment, Poini. This pain as the punishment, too, actually comes in a little bit later as we talk about some of the other philosophical thoughts of pain. Hippocrates believed that pain was an imbalance of humors, and the treatment of that time was like for a like, or the same treatment that football coaches and massage therapists use. Pain for more pain. Actually, I gotta admit, that's one of my personal favorite methods. Good massage. If I'm not crying during massage, was it actually a good massage? Now I want a massage, but unfortunately due to COVID, those aren't opened up at this time. Also, at that time of Hippocrates, they realized that pain had multiple different etiologies, and worked on differentiating it from a simple backache to spinal deformities to having a good broad differential diagnosis and remembering that back pain can be a symptom of more severe disease. On the note of deformities, archaeologic data shows degenerative changes from the Neanderthal man. Apparently, some lived longer than Thag earlier, long enough for degenerative changes. And actually, archaeologists believe that they have found dinosaurs with evidence of arthritic changes in their spines. So that's it. From now on, I will be referring to age-related degenerative changes as dinosaur back. Nothing to do with your age, everything to do with dinosaurs suffering from the same condition. But let's go back to the future real quick and combine the Greek goddess of Poini and the Middle Ages. At this time, pain is due to your sins as God's punishment. Maybe I should involve the chaplain in treating my patient's pain. I've worked with some great interdisciplinary teams, but I have never worked with a chaplain for pain. But in all honesty, things like meditation and prayer can have great benefits for pain and then also the mental health of our patients and ourselves. The other religious explanation of pain at that point, besides being a sinner, is that God is actually causing that pain as part of the trial. This is likely based off of the experiences of Job in the Old Testament, where so many things went wrong in his life, all to prove how firm of a follower he was. Another is that Christ suffered for all, and to be better followers, people need to experience the same pain that he suffered while hanging on the cross. Skip forward a little bit to the start of the Renaissance, and René Descartes in 1644 published a book about pain. His idea was that pain traveled along little strings to the brain. He actually presented an example of a boy getting his foot too close to the fire. At that time, the heat particles from the fire would activate a spot of skin, which is attached to a fine thread, which goes to a valve in the brain, where this actively opens the valve, allowing animal spirits to flow from a cavity into the muscles, causing them to flinch from the stimulus, turning the head and the eyes towards the affected body part, and to move the hand and turn the body away protectively. This actually is not a bad understanding of pain process at the time. Instead of humors, it's chemical and electrical signaling along a string-like nerve. Not too bad. He also suggested a mutually exclusive, yet dual way of looking at pain. Pain is either physical or psychological, but never both. Following him, a whole field of pain study blossomed. Into the age of Enlightenment, 3 schools of thought prevailed. There's a book called The History of Pain, and I will read a quote from it here about the 3 different schools of thoughts during the course of the Age of Enlightenment. First, there was the mechanical school of thought, those who wanted to return to the notion that the human body functions as a simple machine, which was popular up until the middle of the 18th century. Second, there was a vitalist school of thinking, which was more dominant towards the end of the century. These thought leaders adopted the concept of sensitivity, which included the simultaneous concepts of physiology and psychology. And the third, the minority school of thought, animalism, felt that nature was more passive. Those believers accepted mechanical explanations and considered the soul to be directly responsible for all organic functions. Further, they believed it made pain an important sign in illness as a result of internal strife. With the influence of Descartes and the Age of Enlightenment dawned the evolution of pain theories through specific theory, intensity theory, pattern theory, and gate control theory. There's so much more to talk about each one of these individual theories. There is so many more players, though, than I covered as well. But pain is truly a near universal experience, but is also still a great black box. So much mystery is still involved. I personally think one of the fascinating new areas of research plays off of the placebo effect, but can actually make pain worse. It's called the nocebo effect. The pain that people experience is based off of the pain signaling, but how it is interpreted by the brain and the impact on the person's life has a lot to deal with their past experiences and even emotions. You can bet that I will be covering this in future podcasts. It's going to take multiple episodes to just talk about that one. It's something that I think is a new area that is going to have so much benefit for ourselves as physicians and also for our patients. I'm really excited to be starting this journey with you. But before my parting thought, I would ask you to please subscribe, share this with friends, and also reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you about things that you're interested in learning, your thoughts and comments about these podcasts. And also check out what I'm doing on YouTube, the educational videos focusing on the physical exam and then treatment of musculoskeletal conditions to include osteopathic manipulation, along with other treatments. In parting, I found so many fascinating things about the history of pain and ancient remedies, which will provide courses for future podcasts. But I wanted to leave this thought with you from history today. In 18th century Britain and Europe, for example, humoral theory provided a language of pain that encircled around words referring to hotness or coldness, sharpness or heaviness, moistness or dryness. This is quite a stark contrast to the modern ways of talking about pain. Additionally, cultural factors are also equally important. The Latinos in North America distinguish between dolor de cabeza, a headache, and dolor de cerebro, brain ache. Certain cultures within Japan complain of bear headaches that sound like the heavy steps of a bear, in contrast to either deer or woodpecker headaches. In closing, I'd like to remind you that pain is universal, but interpretation is not. It comes from the language that we have, the culture that we have, along with the current train of thought, not to mention all of our past experiences, the experiences of our friends and family, and then even our emotional state at the time. There's so many things that come to play within pain, and we need to remember it that while it is universal, it is still a personal interpretation. Thank you for joining us on Musculoskeletal Minute. We have your back. Please remember that this is for education and does not constitute medical advice. Please subscribe, leave us a positive review, and share with your friends.